Alright guys, so Drago 2020 here, and I'm just gonna jump right into the video. So basically what I did here was I made a tier list, and this is not to say what characters are good in terms of gameplay, but in terms of the lore. So if a certain character isn't like in the highest tier or is in a low tier, it's because of that. If it's different from the gameplay, that's why. But that will be considered when I put them into the tier list. So I have multiple different tiers. I have Barbara tier, I have Diona tier, Klee tier, Hu Tao tier, Shao tier, Diluc tier, Yaimiko tier, and Archon tier. So I named the tier after the characters that scale to this type of person. Alright, I just wanted to make a note before we go on why I place certain characters in certain tiers, and this character, they did this and that was amazing. Why in the world are they in this tier so far below when they're fighting characters in the tier above and was contributing pretty well? I'll get to that in a minute, specifically Yanfei. But I want to tell you how I was ranking. So I was ranking off of strength feats, speed feats, hacks, and what they own or what they control. And those are all extremely important because that determines how strong the vision user is, especially those last few parts. Now, let me get to what they own and what they control. Bennett, he is the leader of the adventure team. He's the only person in it, as far as I remember. Versus Jean, she is the acting Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius. I don't remember how many soldiers the Knights of Favonius has, but it's enough to cover multiple battlefields if they need to, and assist other nations. And she has to lead that. She has to have the power to lead that. She can't be as weak as Yanfei. She can't be as weak as Yanfei. Yanfei is strong. She's not in Barbara tier at all. If she tried to lead a country, she nearly got soloed by treasure hoarders and Eula had to come save her. Yeah, she's not leading anything except for maybe an insurance firm. So that actually plays into her power because people do bully people out of positions physically, and if you're in Sumeru, mentally. So you have to have that kind of fortitude in order to deal with the type of stuff in the vat. So yeah, that's my ranking. That's why certain characters are on a certain tier. Now, if there's an oddity, it's just because of raw power or raw ability, and that just could not be ignored at all. So let's talk about some feats now, specifically Yanfei, and you're gonna see it later on in the tier list. She's gonna be below Yelan comfortably. She's not matching her at all. She did not perform as well as Yelan, even though they worked together pretty seamlessly, actually. And I re-watched that cutscene after I did the voice recording, and she did pretty well, but not as good as Yelan. Her and Shao, those two were the breadwinners in that encounter, aside from maybe the Traveler. But it was just mostly Yuan, and the reason why they were able to destroy as much evil spirits as they did in that cutscene is because they were using a vaporized reaction, and that's an amplifier reaction, so that amplifies her damage along with Yelan's. So if you do the math, technically Yelan was doing more damage than Yanfei in that situation because her damage was being amplified with Yanfei's. That's how vaporize works in game and in the lore. Reactions actually do work in game and in the lore. So that's why Yanfei is where she is and not where people may think she should be. Now, there are some things to talk about, like how the character works in game. Like Noelle. She's strong, super strong in game, and I can't ignore that when I'm making the tier list. But she's not fighting someone like Mona. Well, she could. I'll have to make a video on that later. That's a video. But she's not doing everything that Mona can. She has a shield, big behind sword and some elbow grease. That's it. She's not trapping people in bubbles, creating wormholes, and then setting up traps for people to fall in, predicting the future, because Mona can do that. She has insight. She has a whole bunch of stuff Noelle does not have. And for that, she is in a different tier than Noelle. So all of that stuff, I hope I gave a good description of my ranking system. And I hope I explained it well. Alright, let's get into the tier list. Alright, important things to talk about. Mika is the weakest character in Genshin Impact. I don't know if I'm going to have it on screen, but I'm going to show you his normal attack animations. Not only can he barely use his weapon, he uses a crossbow. And he uses that because he thinks that's threatening. Hilichurls use crossbows, and those are easily dodgeable after they're fired. You can react to them pretty easily, and not to say that every character in the game can do this, but I'm just saying that most characters in the game can. Some of the highest tier characters like the Raiden Shogun, who I'll get to in a minute, might be light speed or faster than the speed of light, or relative to it but below it, one of the three. But I do think the Raiden Shogun is into that type of speed. And in other characters like Supersonic, then you have Mika, who uses a crossbow that's not even going the speed of sound, not even going half the speed of sound. So he's the weakest Genshin Impact character because he uses a weapon that is the least threatening to any of the other characters. Characters like Yao Yao might be able to catch the arrow after it's fired. She might not be able to dodge it, but she might be able to catch it or block it, one of the two. So she's easily stronger. The Raiden Shogun, she's the strongest character in the game. I do think that she is low continental at a high end because of the recent events concerning that sword of hers. I don't know how to pronounce it. And not all characters are going to be in this tier list because this is just to have a general video, and some characters, they just recently came out of me making this video. So if there's not a character on this tier list, that's why. So that's the important stuff out of the way. Let's get into Barba tier. Alright, moving on to Barba tier. So on the screen you should see Barba at number 1, and Mika, he's just far away. He technically shouldn't even be in this tier because Barba knows how to use her weapon. Chi-Chi knows how to use her weapon. Yao Yao knows how to use her weapon. She learned from Madame Ping. Sucrose, she's not where Mika is because at least her animal hypostasis is threatening. Like super threatening. It's building level. If we were to only take that into account, she would be a tier higher. But her normal attacks, I look at them and she's just gentle breeze. Alright, moving on to Diona tier. This is where most of the adventurers fall. So at number 1 we have Kirara. At number 2 we have Fischl. Number 3 and 4 we have Razor and Bennett. Fischl has a speed feat. I remember in her trailer we saw her as Oz traversing the landscape, but she was like extremely fast. So whenever she transforms into Oz, she could just blitz behind entire groups of people without them even noticing. As for Razor and Bennett, those two are very close in just raw power. Like, they are very close. Now the rest of the people in this tier, we've got Yunjin and we have Yanfei. This is no longer true. We are moving on. Yunjin, we haven't really seen her in action. As for Farazan, Dori, and Diona, they are very similar as well. Every character in this tier, they scale to each other. They're all very similar, but these three, they are very, very similar. Now, Dori, I don't know if I should keep her in this spot above Fiona and Florozan, but I do know that she has to be considerably strong in order to have the type of business that she does. If she doesn't, she might end up getting caught, or she might end up in a situation to where no one respects her and they'll just steal her goods. And she also has to be quick and stealthy at the same time. So that is why she's there. She doesn't have the raw power to be above everybody else on this tier, but she does have the skills to be in this tier, even though she doesn't have the raw power as literally anybody else. So her placement here is pretty good. Alright, now we have Klee tier. So Klee tier, these are special cases. Some of these are adventurers, some of them they are not. Some of them they are enlisted in an army and they lead a bunch of troops. So gooooo is one of those people and he's at number 1. Now I kind of have a bias towards Inazumans because those characters are like in a constant state of warfare. So because of that, they're not out of practice. They're able to contribute more to a fight, and they're able to take down bigger monsters by themselves. For example, Cryo-Regispine. They can take that out. I wouldn't say easily. It'll definitely be a strain, but at least I know for someone like Songling or Klee, they won't have that much trouble. Because Songling, you could imply in the cutscene where she kills the Cryo-Regispine, you could imply that she did it herself, a little bit of help from the Traveler, right? So the fact that she's able to contribute as much as she does in that fight speaks volumes from her strength. Nobody else in the lower tier is able to do something like that, not even close. As for Aloy, we can't really scale her based off of what she can do in game, mostly because she has no cutscenes and her kit in game is really bad. So we're just gonna have to go off of what she can do in Horizon Zero Dawn. And I played Horizon Zero Dawn and Horizon Forbidden West. She can take down giant building-sized robots, and some of these robots are mini bosses. So I know Aloy should be able to take down one of those things by herself, so long as she has her bow. Now, do I think that she can take on characters like Child? Absolutely not. I don't think she could take on Senora. I don't think she can take on Boros. Definitely not Dvalin. But characters like sub-bosses like the Regispines, the Great Wolf Lord, she should be able to handle by herself. As for Klee, she might be, in terms of raw damage, the most powerful here, but in terms of durability, she might actually be the lowest. The thing with Klee is there are multiple statements where they say that she could destroy entire either mountainsides or hillsides throughout Mondstadt. And when you consider that they have to keep a close eye on her because they actually think that she can do that, speaks volumes for how much power. If it wasn't for the fact that she was 5 years old, it was tiny compared to literally everybody else in this tier, she might actually be in the next tier over. Chongyun and Kali. Now Chongyun, he has similar abilities to Mona. Now, does he have the same range of abilities as Mona? Absolutely not. But he has the skills of the Adepti, as far as I know. And some of that actually takes place in combat. As for Kali, she scales to Amber, and Amber scales to Kali. I remember in the comic strip I saw, she was able to take down something as big as a lava troll, but it was like a robot. I don't know if I'll be able to put it on screen. I don't even know where I would find that, but she took that down by herself. And Kali, now that she no longer has the sickness, she should be able to scale to something like that. In fact, you could argue that because of her kit in game, you could argue that she's better than Amber because that boomerang is more effective than the Baron Bunny. Even though the Baron Bunny technically does more damage, the Baron Bunny sits there and dances and distracts people, and then it blows up. If someone is smart, they won't get caught by that. But I literally have seen treasure hoarders try to swing at that thing. I don't know why. They should be smart enough to know that it won't attack them. And their burst in terms of functionality is very similar. Of course, Collie's is longer and is more usable, but I do think that Collie is slightly stronger. Now, as for Xingqiu, he has displayed that he is able to take down groups of treasure hoarders, small groups of treasure hoarders by himself. Whenever the traveler encounters him and there are thieves, and it's just a small band of treasure hoarders, he's usually there able to help take them down. As for Xinyan, we haven't really seen that much of her in terms of power. Now, obviously, her burst is like really strong, but we haven't seen her combat ability. We haven't seen anything else besides what she does in game. What she does in game isn't too impressive, I would say. Now, she could most definitely take down like groups of treasure hoarders just by herself, like multiple groups. It's just her raw damage isn't what's carrying her, it's her defense. She's able to put up barriers. In fact, she can use her skill, attack while it's active, and then once it runs out, burst, and she has a refresh shield while possibly taking up the group that she was fighting. And it's a more powerful shield. That's how it works in game. That's how it works in the lore. So we're moving on to Mona tier. So I'll see you in Mona tier. Alright, so there's a character I forgot to talk about in Klee tier, and this is being made after I did my initial recording for Klee tier, and I decided to put Noelle above Aloy. I have Noelle at number 1. When I made this tier list, I pinned characters against each other and against enemies throughout Teyvat, and this is a very special case because one of the characters is not from Teyvat. I'm not talking about the Traveler, I'm talking about Aloy. And a lot of the stuff that Aloy can destroy, Noelle should be able to do that and most likely not take any damage. And that's partially thanks to her shield and her burst. I actually do see Noelle going to one of those robotic T-Rexes that be in Horizon Zero Dawn in Forbidden West and destroying it with her bare hands. That's how strong Noelle is. So she quite literally is the strongest character in this tier. And if I were to pin her against any character in this tier, she wins, period. So we're going to go on to Mona tier for reals this time. Alright, it's time. Yanfei. I slandered the crap out of this character. And I rewatched the cutscene another time, and this time I decided to put her in Hu Tao / Mona tier. I got it wrong. It was not treasure hoarders. In my initial recording I thought it was treasure hoarders, but it was not. It was the Abyss Order. And because of how strong I know those people are, I do not see any reason why anyone in the tier below Xiao tier would be able to win against them. And I can't necessarily use that to judge her strength. Instead, I can only rely on what she shows both in game and in that cutscene in the chasm. And in that cutscene in the chasm, what she displayed was very impressive. Now, here's why I decided to put her this high above where I originally ranked her. In that cutscene, she was able to figure out how to replicate Yelan's illusion disperse ability within seconds, and she was able to destroy the illusion and help Xiao get back to where everyone else was. She was able to figure out something that the literal conqueror of demons could not figure out, and she had to tell him how to do it. Well, she didn't tell him exactly how to do it, but she pointed him in the right direction. And she broke through the illusion just as easily as he did, but he would later go on to do something way more impressive during that cutscene. So I'm not putting her in the same tier as Xiao, I'm putting her in the tier below. In the main story, she claims to be an Adaptus, and she shows that she actually does have some kind of power in that realm, but we don't really get to see how much of it, so that's another reason why I ranked her as low as I did before. But upon seeing that she is capable of this amongst a whole slew of other things, I decided to put her in this tier. Now, I was very split on where to put her, whether I would put her above Mona or below Mona. And for the time being, I decided to put her above Mona. This could change very easily. Like, one minute I could feel like this character should belong here, and another I feel like she shouldn't. But for now, that's where she's gonna be. They're very equal, so I don't really have a problem with one being above the other. It really doesn't mean anything in this context. So moving on to the initial recording. If I don't mention this character at all beyond this point, this was done way after I did the initial recordings for all the other tiers, even the mistakes I forgot about. Alright, moving on. So next up we have Mona tier. Now this tier is weird. It's filled up of only like 4 characters right now. The reason for that is because I can't put them in the tier below this, but I can't put them in the tier above this either, because there are some absolute troopers in that one that would destroy every single one of these people in one hit. So we got Ito. He performed a feat that's higher than both Xiao and Yolan, but if they were to fight, he would lose because he's not that good at fighting and he's kind of stupid. Next up, we've got Yoimiya. Now, the reason why I put her in this tier is because those fireworks that we see in those cutscenes, she uses those in battle. And that whole firework display is pretty much what it looks like for her to fight. At least when she gets serious. So the fact that she enhances her arrows with pyro means that those explosions are much more powerful and they do a lot more damage. So she by herself might actually be able to take out an entire hillside or carve out mountains just by herself. As for Mona, I put her in this tier not because of her raw damage, but because she is able to create wormholes and transport herself and other people around battle, along with liquefying herself and slipping around. She has like one of the highest utilities, so she could quite literally put up a wormhole, have someone run through it trying to attack her, put them in a bubble while they're trying to figure out what's going on, and then just pop. So that's pretty much how she fights. But we never really see her at full power because she's constantly hungry. She's spending too much money on like archaeology stuff. And in Hu Tao, she's the strongest in this tier. She's in this tier and not the one below it because she can teleport, and in her elemental burst, she straight up slaps the soul out of a person. Mona doesn't do that. Quite literally no one else in the game does that except for her. And she does it like casually. And you can see that happening in her elemental burst because you literally see like a second red or orangish image of the person just getting smacked by the ghost. So she literally is Doctor Strange, but a kid version that's whack. So that's why she's in this tier. So moving on, we are going to Xiao tier. Alright, so I'm making this recording after I did Mona tier. So I put Rosaria below Hu Tao. And that's very strange. Rosaria is a better fighter in my opinion than Hu Tao. It's just, I can't scale her above someone who can literally knock the soul out of someone. But Rosaria, she is very strong. She can fight every single person in this tier, and she is also very stealthy. She can teleport, and that's very important because an ability like that allows you to blitz people pretty badly in Genshin Impact. And that's why I hold people who can teleport to very high standards. So that's why Rosaria is in this tier. That's why she's below Hu Tao, but I did put her above Mona because I do think that she would destroy Mona and literally everybody else below her. So moving on to Xiao tier, for real this time. Alright, moving on to Xiao tier. Now I'm not going to go over everyone in this tier. I might make dedicated videos to these characters or describe them finding another character. I'm mostly going to go over Xiao, and that description of him should describe the other characters in this tier and why they are there. So Xiao was placed beside Zhongli, and Zhongli ran all of Liwei. And usually characters in this tier, that's what happens with them. They're placed next to someone who runs the entire country. They also know abilities that have been lost to time. So if they were to try and fight everyone in every single tier below this, they might whip something out that they're not expecting and one-shot every single person there. They're also extremely knowledgeable. They're also extremely resilient. And a good chunk of these characters here are over 100 years old. Now, I have a suspicion that Keqing might be from Conria because she has the same eyes as Dainsleif and Kaya, but that's a whole different theory for a different video. Right now we're talking about where she ranks, but I did take that into account when I ranked her on this tier. So that is a brief description of Xiao tier. You can apply most of what I said about Xiao to a good chunk of the characters that are here, even Candace. Alright, so moving on to Diluc tier. Alright, moving on to Diluc tier. Now, Diluc tier, these are people who own a massive business, or they are the leader of a well-known family within Genshin Impact, or they lead the entire city. Now, notice that Ningguang is not on this list. You will see her coming up later because I can't put her in this tier. She's too powerful. Now, these people, they're also capable of taking out characters like Horus, or if you were to place them alongside of an Archon, they could actually aid and be of some use, like how Venti was leading the charge and Diluc, the Traveler, and Jean were following right behind them, and they managed to take out Dvalin. Now, of course, Venti was weakened, but the point still stands. They're able to work together. They're able to fight along someone who should be able to, I think, still split mountains, even though he's like super weak. I put Kogami at number 1 because she doesn't just lead a whole city. She leads an entire island, Watatsumi Island, and she has been fighting for years against the shogunate, and mainly against Kujo Shara, who has been trying to take over that place because they've been fighting against the Sakuko decree, right? That which is the Vision Hunt decree. So those are the main people who are fighting against it. And we have Ayato in this tier because he's the head of a massive family. You have Eula in this tier because she's the head of a massive family. Now, there are some oddities here, like Kazuha. I'll explain that in a minute. I have Beto in this tier as well, all Beto. And I have Tignari and I have Kaya in this tier. Now, here's why Kazuha is here. Kazuha is here because he halted the strike of the Right Shogun, and the Traveler compared what that feat was compared to what Beto did against that sea monster, and she was like, whoa, that's insane. So that's like top of the verse aside from Archons in the next tier. And we have Eula because she's the head of the Lawrence clan, and she has to be the most powerful or else she'll be bullied out. We have Tignari because he scales like far below everyone else here except for Kaya. I think Kaya might be stronger, but given how he wasn't afraid to talk to the doctor the way he did, I'd say that maybe you could put him above Kaya, or maybe just Tignari just did not care. And Diluc is in this tier, obviously. He was able to fight Dvalin, and there's a couple ways to interpret him. I might make a separate video for this one character specifically. You could say that Venti was buffing him in a fight with Dvalin because he's an Archon, he probably knows how to do that stuff. Or you could say that he wasn't, and Diluc was still able to fight with them because Jean in the Traveler was using the power of Animo, and Diluc uses the power of Pyro. So you could say that he wasn't getting the buff because the Animo Archon only buffs Animo. That would make Diluc much stronger and closer to Kogami on this list, and possibly above Beidou. Then he and Beidou are more equal. He's like number 2 and then Kogami is number 1. I don't see her doing what Kazuha did with the Riding Shogun. Now there's one more person that I need to get to. I forgot to get to him, and that is Albedo. He's tough to place because knowledge is power, like physical power in the verse. And the more knowledge you have, the more power you have. Why you see people in weird spots. So since he's the head alchemist, it would make sense to put him in this tier. So that's why he's here, just off of that. And he did show that he does have a ton of power when he beat someone who the Traveler and Eula like put together couldn't beat, which was a clone of himself. So he beat a clone of himself that was souling one of the characters in this tier, along with the Traveler, who should be in Archon tier. That is a impressive feat. So that's why he is here. So moving on, we are going to Yaimiko tier. Alright, moving on to Yaimiko tier now. These people are built different. One of these people is literally built different, and that is the Wanderer. The Wanderer is in this tier because he was at one point in Archon. And we have Yaimiko because she's actually broken. She's at number 2. Number 3, we have Ningguang. I'll get to her in a minute. And I have Tartagula Child. Yaimiko is like more of a best friend of the Shogun. And I'm just gonna say this real quick. Lisa's skill, where she calls down lightning, if you were to put all those lightning balls together, it would equal that one lightning bolt of her burst. And she does 4 of them in total, if you have 3 of those turrets down. Now, those turrets are like separate entities, so she can like literally call someone to fight with her or for her. That's impressive because like 3 of those things together, we saw one of those samurai, those big samurai dudes. He was trapped in between them, and she was just literally shocking him and just watching in her like trailer. She has the raw power to be in this tier, and she also has the knowledge to be in this tier. So she's like one of the worst characters you want to mess with. And number 3 in this tier, we have Ningguang. Now, she was constantly busting out stuff against that monster that was threatening to destroy all of Liyue or all of Liyue Harbor. And she was like, alright, let's try this. And she shot like missiles at it. Alright, let's try this. And like, okay, we're gonna nuke it with the Jade Chamber thing. Tartag, I don't really need to go that much into him. He was pressing the Traveler like with his raw strength alone. He doesn't have the knowledge that everyone else here does, but his raw strength was enough to press the Traveler. That's impressive. And don't get me started on his foul legacy form. And then Lisa's in this tier because I remember reading she is the most intelligent or distinguished person from the academia in 100 years. Nobody else in the whole game has that attribute. Now, the academia is insane. The knowledge that the academia has covers almost everything across the map. And to say that she is the most distinguished from an academy like that, you have to like make up some stuff to be able to graduate. Like you have to impress the sages. The fact that she's able to do that casually because she's the most distinguished in 100 years, and they wanted her help in constructing a new Archon, which is what the Wanderer was supposed to be, because of how experienced she is. So she's like the weirdest person on this whole entire tier list, aside from like Rosaria from early on. So I put her here. I feel comfortable with her here. It makes sense to put her here. And that's pretty much Yaimiko tier. So we're going to be moving on to Archon tier. We're the final tier. Alright, finally, we've gotten to Archon tier. Now, let's just start simple. The Raiden Shogun is the strongest character in the game, period. She split an island in half, right? Zhongli should be able to do that. She got stuck in a separate dimension and fought her own clone for 500 extra years. And then once the Traveler intervened again, she became strong enough to fight her clone after she transformed into this, I don't know what it is. And I don't know if you want to say that's a 10 times multiplier or a 5 times multiplier. Either way, she was able to beat that transformed Raiden Shogun with the sword. So she's 10 times stronger than that island splitting feat. So she might actually just be able to bisect the entire island with like a full power strike. Because what happened was, one of her teammates died and she struck that snake thing that you see on the island. Now, she didn't slice the entire island in half. She sliced towards the edge of the island. It's very deep, but now I think she actually can slice the entire island in half. I don't know the calcs for that, but that's insane. And Zhongli's number 2, he's solidly number 2. I remember in the Archon quest for Venti said he's now the weakest Archon. I would argue he's not. He's the second weakest. I'll get on that in a second. But Zhongli, he's able to fight creatures he created hundreds of years ago. He's able to beat them and seal them away, and then invincible because of the Jade Shield. So yeah, he's firmly number 2 on this list, and he's not moving. Venti, I just said that he's the second weakest. I don't know if he can bust mountains like he used to and send them creaming through the ocean to where it only shows up every so often. That's how far he sent it away from the mainland. Back in the day, he would have easily been like number 2, but not anymore, because I don't think Zhongli hasn't displayed anything as crazy as that. And actually, I think that would put him at number 1. Because A never actually displayed anything like that. So he used to be the strongest Archon because of that. That sending the island away. I think it was Dodoko Island. Yeah, it was Dodoko Island. But now, he got destroyed by Senor. Now he was fatigued. The Traveler was fatigued, and they had no help. That's not an anti-feat. They're just exhausted from fighting a giant sky dragon. And I have Nahida at the bottom tier because she's literally like, she's been asleep for a very long time, and she hasn't shown any type of attack, potency, or destructive damage. Now, she did show that she's able to put people in loops. That is disgusting, but what is she supposed to do after that, right? Like, for real. What is she supposed to do? All she can do is like jump and press buttons and try to damage them. Perfect. But that's like weak. She had to rely on the Traveler to do most of the damage against the Wanderer when he was an Archon. So the fact that she couldn't contribute at all, aside from maybe giving him a Shrine of Maya and putting a Seed of Skanda on the Wanderer, aside from that, she could not offer that much more. That's it. That's all she can do. Versus Venti, he was able to fight against a dragon who should be more powerful than the Wanderer. I mean, should be weaker than the Wanderer. Once he was an Archon, I mean. So, Nahida, she's at the bottom of this list. She's firmly at the bottom of this list. If I had a second icon for A, I would just probably label that like beneath A, like the Shogun. And we would have like 5 characters in this tier. Like A number 1, the Shogun number 2. And if I really wanted to be nitty gritty about it, I would probably put Makoto above A. Because that's Makoto's sword, and that's, she gave her whatever was left of the energy she had into the sword. So the fact that it was able to buff her this much is like how strong she used to be until she was like killed. So if I were to place her on this tier, it would be 3 A icons. Raiden Makoto, A, and the Shogun. In that order, in descending order. So that's Archon tier. Hold that thought for a second. This recording was made after I made my initial Archon tier list. So, as you can see, there are 2 extra people here. And that's Shinha and both Travelers. Now, I don't know how strong the other Traveler is once he gets separated, but I do know that the Traveler that you play with, like right now, that should be Archon tier. Like hands down. He or she literally fought against an Archon, and quote unquote won, and he fought alongside 2 other Archons. So I think it's fair to put him in this tier. And Shinha, surprisingly, is not in Young Miko tier. Shinha did something that none of the other characters in Young Miko tier could do, and that is defeat the Lord of Vortex's wife. Now, the Lord of Vortex's wife is weaker than the original, but that doesn't change the fact that no one, again, was able to do anything, and they actually thought about sacrificing the Jade Chamber again, until Shinha, like, two-shotted the monster, essentially. She hit it with, like, one giant cryo attack, and then went underneath the sea, held up the sea. Held up the sea. Held up the sea. Now, she did place down something that was doing the work for her, but that did come from her initially. And then she defeated it after she did the initial attack and holding up the ocean by herself. Essentially, the Traveler was pretty much a non-factor, aside from maybe doing some elemental reactions with her. But with what, like Electro Geo, she is blatantly portrayed to be stronger than the Traveler. In fact, she was lifting something that the Traveler, him or herself, said that they couldn't lift. And she did it, I think, with either one hand or two. On top of this, she should be able to teleport. She also has shown that she might have the ability to seal people, similar to how Zhongli does it, but only not as strong as Zhongli. Zhongli is completely different. However, I do think that she is closer to Zhongli in strength than the Traveler is, even at this stage when he has Dendro, he or she. She is, I believe, the auntie of Chongyun, and we do know that Chongyun comes from a family of people who is able to exercise spirits, so she's more in tune with that than he is, because whenever he goes to exercise a spirit, he doesn't do anything. He just walks in the room and the spirit just runs because of his presence. I might actually make a video specifically on Shinha, because there's literally no other character aside from little Archons that are like her. And the only one that I think that might stand a chance against her is maybe the Doctor, but we have yet to see anything that he has done, aside from putting the Traveler to sleep and having clones of himself. Moving on to the regular recording, if I say something weird, in spite of what I just said here, or don't mention Shinho the Traveler later on, that was done before this, and I forgot to add both characters to the actual tier list, so keep that in mind. Alright, let's continue. Alright, that's gonna do it. This took a very long time. Like, you have no idea. This took weeks to put together because I had to consider where certain characters fall. Then I had to figure out how I'm going to do the video, and I just decided to YOLO it. Hence why I decided to do the first majority outside, and then I just decided to do the rest inside, like right now. And stay tuned for future videos, because I plan on doing things like Diluc versus Ayato. That is much closer than you think, even though Ayato is Hydro and Diluc is Pyro. Noelle versus Mona. Stay tuned for that. And if you liked the video, like, subscribe, comment, tell me what you like. If you didn't like the video, you can thumbs down it. Tell me what you didn't like. How can I improve it? This is literally my first, like, voiceover for anything. So, thank you, and have a wonderful day.